Okay, everyone, we have the Assistant for Football, Sports Performance and Internship Director, Coach Mason Garrison, with us from Youngstown State University. Reasonably close to my heart because we just had one of our intern coaches from Marquette University take on a graduate assistant role there with Coach Colton Kruger. So I'm excited to get a bit of a peek behind the curtain myself as to what happens at Youngstown State. But obviously, we're talking about the internship program here for young and developing coaches. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn the mic over to you, Coach Garrison. Please go ahead, introduce yourself a little bit more. Tell us about how you got into the field and what your journey was like.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anyone in our field has ever had much of a prototypical or standard entry into the field of strength and conditioning or sports performance. I would definitely say uh, it really took me a while to find my path. I didn't go to undergrad for any of it, so I like to tell everyone everything I've learned has been, ruling. Um, I found my love for the weight room through my mentors and coaches, um, guys that really helped me when I was a player. I was a student athlete at the University of Cincinnati. As most do, I struggled with injuries quite a bit. So I always found myself either in the athletic training room or in the weight room, whether it's injury modification or return to play, rehab, what have you. It kind of resulted in a shortened career, not something that I wanted to happen, but it happens to the best of us at some point. So from there, I medically retired and didn't really know what I wanted to do, was still trying to figure it out, still finishing undergrad. From there, I went and I did my capstone at a high school. I ended up coaching there. Loved coaching, loved the interaction with the kids. Wasn't too crazy about the sport specific stuff, so to speak. I didn't like making decisions on who was starting, who was doing this, but I loved the weight room, loved the development that comes with it. I think it's such a special place. And really, I have to attribute it to the guys that coached me when I was an athlete, because without them, it would have been just another aspect of coaching. So from there, I went back to the University of Cincinnati and interned with football sports performance for a year. So I was there pre-COVID 2020, and then throughout that whole year, through the season into the following spring. From there, I was given the opportunity to go to Wittenberg University. I covered, I want to say, about 7 teams, quite a few teams, assisted with almost every varsity team, assisted with football. So in terms of, going from an internship to a professional role, I definitely was thrown in the fire. It was one of the greatest learning experiences I've ever had. So I was there for a full calendar year. And then Coach Rodenberg here at Youngstown State, who actually coached me when I was an athlete at Cincinnati, gave me a call and gave me the opportunity to come here to assist directly with football. So, it's really been a ride, it's gone very fast, but I'm thankful that I can be here and be back with one of my mentors. And, I'm even more grateful that I can be a mentor to these young interns and these athletes, and just develop relationships with all aspects of it. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell, so to speak. Hopefully it wasn't too long-winded.
Yeah, I love it. No, no, that's awesome. It's great you've had a full circle experience. The amount of times that happens is quite surprising. Like, it actually happens reasonably frequently that you have a coach that you've developed under and the profession moves around a lot, but it's a small world, and eventually you end up, circling back around, circling the wagons, and you're back with your previous mentors. That's interesting to hear. I love that you were thrown in the fire at Wittenberg. I had a similar experience, not in terms of taking charge of teams, but doing my internship with Coach Mack in 2015. Man, that was a day one in the fire experience. But though, just like you said, those are the experiences where you learn the most. So embracing those times is awesome. That's really good.
Definitely.
So at Youngstown State, with your staff, we're going to talk about the graduate assistant program a little bit towards the end here, but with your intern coaches, those that are really just getting into the field, stepping in, maybe they're an undergrad freshman, maybe they've had 1 or 2 internships under their belt already. What can they expect to be doing just on a daily basis while they're at Youngstown State?
Sure. So, my biggest thing with interns is I want to see them, and I'm sure most people have this philosophy. I want to see them dominate and execute to an elite level, the very little things. And those little things might be stocking the fridge. Those little things might be cleaning, reorganizing, but that's only one piece of it. For me, I don't want, young strength coaches that can come in and just be task doers. I want kids that can come in and earn that trust by doing those things at an elite level and kind of being able to be given responsibilities really quickly and earn that trust and be able to say, hey, I need you to take racks 1 through 3. You're going to train these kids today. I'm going to keep an eye on you, but go. I want kids to come in and get a true thrown in the fire, so to speak, experience, because one advantage we have here definitely is, it's a smaller program. We're competing with the Ohio States, the Pitts, Cincinnati's, schools of that nature. So it's going to be much more hands-on. To answer your question, I want kids that are prepared for that, kids that want to be strength and conditioning coaches. I understand there's always kind of that gray area, that in the fence, that self-doubt. That's what I'm looking for. So I'm not looking for that stuff. Sorry, kind of fumbled my words there, but I'm looking for the kids that know what they want to do and can accept that role and kind of run with it. So, there's the intern duties that we all had to do, whether it be, like I said, stock the fridge, do this, clean this up, sweep the chalk. Great. Those things are all good. And it's important to understand and take ownership in our facilities and, show the respect it deserves and do things that we all had to go through. But like I said, at the end of the day, I really want it to be an experience where they walk away from here confident that they can step into a graduate assistantship role, or maybe even a full-time assistantship role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. So then in terms of like the weekly makeup, and obviously it might shift per semester that they're there, but you guys are training your student athletes Monday through Friday. Do you have weekend training? What does that look like?
Yeah. So, one of the goals I have is to kind of get them as much experience as possible because, for me, I'm an assistant for football. That's the realm that I like to be in. But I think it's important to have an understanding and appreciation and experience in all, whether it be Olympic sports, football, what have you. So our interns, they get 1 to 2 team assignments. Typically, how I like to structure it is 1 in season, 1 out of season. That way they're both kind of seeing both ends of the spectrum. Obviously, it depends on how long they're with us. If it's an undergrad that's just here for a semester, or if it's more of a professional internship role or a former athlete, it kind of varies. But in terms of training, we're here every day. I work 6 days a week. At some point, we're all here 7 days a week. So when we're in, the interns are in. Their responsibilities are with their team assignments and their assigned coaches. So whether it be, our director of Olympics with softball, or maybe it's with us for football, or maybe they're in our other facility working with basketball, they're expected to be at all those training sessions before and after, going over what the schedule looks like, going over what the training session looks like with our coaches, things of that nature. Like I said, that's 5 to 7 days a week, depending on where we're at. We were very lucky to have some good interns this past fall who were able to really commit to the weekends. With football, like I said, it's all based on situations, and I like to think we're pretty flexible and respective of especially undergrad students and what the obligations they have. In terms of, and then curriculum, or no?
Yeah, we can dive into that. We can dive into that, absolutely. No, I just wanted to kind of emphasize a point there, that I love how you're giving them exposure both to Olympic sports and to football. We talk about this all the time with various different coaches, but exposure and experience, like 2 different things, but you have to really almost begin with exposure as a young coach before you can step into decision-making roles and actually get true hands-on experience in that role. But yeah, seeing small teams, large teams, I'm sure football is a high pressure environment, very energetic, lots of tin being thrown around the room. So it's nice for young coaches to see that and see what kind of coaching demeanor might be required in that setting versus, here at Marquette, when we're working with the men's golf team, that's going to look very different than a men's football team. Are the outcomes any different? No, high performance, but almost understanding the nature of being a social chameleon in coaching and matching the energy of the sport, that it dictates. I think that's awesome that you do that. And I also think it's nice that you layer on making sure they see in-season protocols, out-of-season protocols, because when you're young, you take everything at, I say young, when you're a developing coach, you take everything at face value until you start to see this like subtle nuances of, now I understand why the coaches have decided to do this because of in-season protocols versus this for without season protocols. So,
and just going off that, I there's things even today, and I imagine we'll never stop, that, like you just said, I think back to when I was interning, I'm like, wow, it really makes sense now. Like the things all get tied together, and that's how and just to continue on it, that's how I like to structure it with the interns, because, first days are always the worst, but if we can keep it from general to specific, just like we do with training, right? Like, all right, today you're taking notes, you're watching. A week from now, you're coaching, you're getting experience. And like you said, trying to peel back the layers, but at the end of the day, like you said, it's face value for these young and aspiring strength coaches. So, but
yeah, that's great. So then layering on top, you just mentioned it there. Let's talk a little bit about your curriculum per se, or how you develop these coaches and truly start to add value, whether that is in the practical skills that they're developing or just the knowledge base that underpins their ability to be able to coach. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, what you do with your young coaches to help them gain that knowledge and experience?
Sure. So, for me, and I'll tell every intern when we onboard them, and I'll tell them frequently throughout the semester, your development is in the palm of your hand. So you're only going to be as good, and you're only going to get as far as you want to. None of us can hold anyone's hand. We can give you all the tools and resources in the world. And this is even something I think back to when I was an intern, that it took me a while to understand and grasp, that no one was just going to tell me how things worked. We have to go and figure it out and understand why we do things and how we do things and what the purpose behind everything is. So, in terms of curriculum, I like to keep it very case by case. So obviously at a smaller school, we're not going to have an army of interns. We're going to have, we might have a population of mostly undergrad students, or, one former athlete, one undergrad, and one intern from a different school just here for a semester. So I want to prepare them for leaving here developed as much as they can, but also better prepared to step into a role after an internship, because at the end of the day, no one can stay an intern forever. If for whatever reason they wanted to, I'm not sure why, but one of the big emphasis I have here is preparing to get certified. So in terms of curriculum, I think it's really important to learn the who's and the what's and the X's and O's and all that stuff. But I also know that there's a time and a place. And for most of the interns we have, maybe they're not so much ready for article citation, or, going through these upper level or upper tier education lectures or things of that nature, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Maybe what they need is to really, really, really understand and dial in on the basics of the Essentials book, which is it the gold standard? I don't necessarily think so. But at the same time, in order for you to be a professional in this world, you have to be certified. So I think I'm a huge believer in pairing these kids to get certified, for one, to give them opportunities and open up a door to take on that next step. So that is a big part of our curriculum. On the other end, I do want them to critically think and think outside the box. So a lot of times, and this just must be, I don't know if this is just something I learned from my internship, but there's so many times where you just have to get creative and figure it out. So sometimes they'll get vague direction on tasks that need to get done, and they might have a million questions and limited time to do it with high stress, and it's got to get done. So learn how to figure it out, learn how to think on the fly, and you'd be amazed at how that translates over to the floor. So I think getting them to understand that what they want to learn is on them. Are you asking questions? Are you taking notes? Great. Awesome. We can talk about everything you want to talk about. From there, how are we preparing you to take the next step after you intern? Are we getting you closer to being certified? Because a lot of times too, exercise science programs are paying for the tests. And that's one thing, as a fresh intern coordinator, I've kind of realized is, man, I can't just drop random knowledge bombs on these kids. I need to make sure that they're learning what they really, really, really need to learn, because truthfully, once they learn all that stuff in the textbook, everything else kind of makes sense. You can go through an article and annotate it. You can have better shop talks. You can have a better grasp on, whiteboard discussions and things once they really, really, really start to understand, okay, what does a volume and intensity chart look like? Okay, what are these things that we need to understand? So in terms of curriculum, I don't believe in, burying kids in projects. I think part of that is because they do have obligations. Most of them still have school. Some of them might even be athletes in their off season. But what I do believe in is, the power of asking questions, not being afraid to ask questions, taking your development into your own hands. We've all got a million resources. All of us have a hard drive filled to the brim with charts and articles and all these things. And, I want to give them the appropriate information that's going to help them learn, but it's not going to hinder their growth, if that makes sense. I think there's a fine line to walk when you're trying to mentor these kids in this field, because eventually, like you said, you get thrown into the fire, and that's when you really learn.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you really learn how to train athletes. But until then, how can we set them up for success?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I start with the basics. I think it's all too tempting a lot of the time. And I think I'm going to sound like an old person right here, but I think social media has a tendency to show us all the bells and whistles and shiny objects. And young coaches nowadays might want to jump at, I want to learn everything there is to know about velocity-based training. And you're just like, right, let's pump the brakes and talk about the basics of just general periodization programming and exercise selection to begin with, before we decide to dial in, VBT metric. Right. So no, I love that you have, it's like set them up with the basics first, begin to build that base of confidence in that coaching. And then, you start to, those conversations, just like you said, that it's in the palm of their hand. So when they ask the questions, then that's naturally going to develop the conversations to dive into rabbit holes with them as well. I love that. And you've repeatedly said time and time again, we're looking to help them take the next step into a GA position, which is absolutely spot on. GA or assistant level position or whatever it is they happen to move on to next. For you guys at Youngstown State, I know your staff is reasonably unique, and you actually have quite a lot of graduate assistants within your department. So I wonder if you could talk about that and how the graduate assistantship works at Youngstown State, and how maybe the graduate assistants interact with the intern coaches, and if there's any chance of upward mobility. If you were an intern coach there at Youngstown State, is there a good chance that you might get a GA-ship in the future? Maybe touch on those things a bit.
Definitely. So, we're very blessed with, the resources we have here. We've got 5 graduate assistants right now with a couple roles that will open up at some point. And, how it is, when you're a graduate assistant, if a full-time opportunity presents itself, regardless of where you're at, you might take that opportunity if it's best for your career. So I think it's really great that we do have so many graduate assistant roles here. One, it gives, interns an opportunity to work towards a master's, which is so important as this field progresses. And it also allows, us to have more coaches to cover more teams. When I was at the last place I was at, it was a little bit smaller, a little bit less resources. It was phenomenal. It was a great experience, but I do know it was very overwhelming with the amount of programming I was doing. It was far too many teams. And I think that it's really important here to, really be elite with 2 to 3 teams versus being average with 7 to 8. Mm-hmm. So I think they're set up very well in that regard. In terms of interactions with interns, graduate assistant or full-time, they've earned the right to be treated no differently than a full-timer as a graduate assistant. So I tell our interns, their resources too, they might even be better than me because they might be fresh off an internship, whereas I might be a couple years removed. They're full of knowledge. They're full of experience. All of the ones here we have are from different walks of life, from states that I've never even traveled to. So I urge our interns, please, please, please pick their brains. I urge our GAs, please, please, please develop these kids, help them, go out of your way. One of my biggest mentors told me, and I'll never forget it. He said, being a mentor and mentorship is actually really, really hard, and it's supposed to be hard. So if you think it's going to be an easy thing, you're probably not doing it right, and you probably aren't in it for the right reason. So that is one thing that I try to encourage to everyone. As the intern director, like, obviously I don't know if soft spot is the right term, but like, I'm so involved with the interns that I want what's best for them. So I always, I'm always pushing for them to, be developed. And whether it be from me or from Coach Rodenberg or from any other coach on staff, we need to go out of our way and make sure these kids are getting what they need to. And on the contrary, like I said, our interns need to take the initiative and don't be afraid to go ask questions. No one is too scary to go talk to. No one's going to tell you you're not smart or you're not this or you're not that. It's a really positive environment. So I think that's really important. The graduate assistants are really, really great because, for football, which is my main responsibility, we've got essentially, and I say this with quotes, like a Power 5 style staff. So we have our director of sports performance for football, myself, and then we have 3 graduate assistants. So we have a full filled out 5-man staff. And at a smaller FCS level, that's not something you're going to see everywhere. So it not only makes our jobs a little easier, but it allows us to do so many more things. So it's not one of those situations where, you're going to come in and if you want to be with football, you can't. There's so many opportunities to work with so many different sports here. So that's with football. Now, the goal and the vision in the Olympic side and the graduate assistantship side is to keep things consistent, not only for the mental health of our coaches, but really for the well-being of our student athletes. So many times in so many schools, it's like a constant revolving door of you get a new coach every semester. And sometimes that might be kind of the line you walk with graduate assistants. But I think with the environment we have here, we're able to really develop consistency and continuity with who coaches what team. So now we're not having a coach here for the spring, not here for the summer, and then the fall rolls around and it's in season for his team. And well, we're out of luck. So that's one important vision we're continuing to work towards. Just like the internship program, the GA program, constantly building, trying to make it as unique and developmentally significant as possible.
Yeah, I love it. No, it sounds like there's a ton of thought behind it, and even more, like you say, to develop throughout it. One thing I really like about that is, and sometimes people will kind of speak negatively of programs with a lot of graduate assistantships because of the revolving door concept or whatever. But for me, if you're attracting, you're going to get some decent candidates applying for your GA positions, and then they're probably going to be pretty highly sought after. So you're going to bring in people with experience at different institutions with different connections, and they're going to come be part of your staff and make you better. But then I'm thinking, if I put myself in the shoes of an intern coach at Youngstown State, I know that 1, there's a chance of upward mobility for me to move into a graduate assistant role. But 2, those graduate assistants are eventually going to leave and go somewhere else. And now they're part of my network. And so wherever they go, there's a good chance that later on down the road, whether it's in the next 6 to 12 months or 5-10 years, I might be able to, if I develop good relationships with them, lean on them for, career advice or help as well. So I think it's an awesome model. I think it's really good. Definitely attractive. So in terms of a young coach that might look at this page on Connect and think, I think I'll submit an application to Youngstown State. For you, what would you be excited to see if you saw an application? Like, what are you looking for in an intern coach to come to Youngstown State?
Sure. I think, again, start with the basics. A well-worded email goes a long way. So, and that's really wisdom for anyone. I want people to reach out. I don't want people to ever be afraid to reach out if they need anything. When it comes to applying for an internship here or reaching out for details about it, I want kids that want to go into strength and conditioning or sports performance or whatever you want to call it. I'm not ever going to sit here and tell you I'm only accept football interns. That's not what I'm about. I want anyone in any realm that wants to go into that sports performance field. Now, if it's one of those situations where it's kind of, I'm on the fence, I'm not so sure, I'm more than happy to provide guidance and help. But the number one thing I look for is kids that know what they want to do, because it's so much easier to develop and help when there's no indecisiveness. So a well-worded email, someone that knows what they want to do. They don't always have to know what direction. That's okay. We can help them with that. And then, the ability to be reachable. I've sat in on a lot of interviews, whether it be for graduate assistants or part-time roles or full-time roles or interns, and, can't reach kids. So that's kind of just a small thing, but, make sure your resume is in order, make sure your ducks in a row, and just, attack it with a sense of professionalism and maturity. And that's about it. There's nothing, some wisdom one of my mentors told me, and I'll keep this, PG. He looked at me and goes, you don't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, and that's okay. That's fine. We still don't know everything, but you're going to learn. So I'm pretty lenient when it comes to young strength and conditioning coaches, and having the perspective of like, all right, they might not know much right now, and that's okay. We can correct it. We can develop. We can help. So someone that's willing to work, someone that's excited, someone that loves athletics, loves relationships, someone that knows how to word an email, things of that nature.
Yeah, I love to hear that. A well-worded email, rarer than you might think. But
yes.
But absolutely. No, yeah, I can agree more with that. And we've said this multiple times on these Connect calls is we're not expecting coaches to come in with tons of experiences or a massive knowledge base. But we are expecting you to be able to convey your desire to grow, your passion for the field, all these things. So yeah, be yourself, write a well-worded email, and make sure your resume is looking nice. Good. I like that. So as you mentioned, obviously anyone who's watching this video can get in touch with you via the contact information that's on this page. And these will be updated as semesters go. So Coach Mason Garrison, can't thank you enough for your time. I appreciate that. I'm excited to get you guys up on Connect here. And we hope to see more and more young coaches heading towards Youngstown State to develop in this field.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you, Coach. I love what you're doing. I appreciate you having me on.